The ASICS Trabuco Max 5 is a shoe that's built for comfort, protection, spending long days on your feet, whether that's hiking or doing those longer runs. However, it's seen some big updates compared to the last model. I'm going to break down the key features of this shoe so you have a better idea if it's worth upgrading, or if you're new to the Trabuco Max series, how good it will be for your feet depending on your needs. So let's talk about the specifications first. We've got 40 mils of cushioning in the rear foot, 35 in the forefoot, giving you a 5 mil difference from the back to the front of the shoe. So that gives you a nice even distribution of pressure across the foot. It comes in at 298 grams for size 9 men's US, so that's 13 grams lighter than the Max 4. And underneath the shoe, we've got ASICS Classic ASICS grip, and it with 4mm loads in a classic V and W shape. We'll talk about how that impacts traction later on. But first, let's talk about what's new on top of the shoe. Well, first of all, we've got a water repellent engineered mesh. We've got some toe guards towards the inside along the front of the shoe. Now, they don't provide rigidity in terms of support for protection against kicking rocks or branches, but it will give some extra durability to the upper of the shoe. Now, in terms of the toe box, we've got a normal width, but we've got a normal to slightly low volume. So those of you with a slightly larger foot or broader foot may not enjoy the fit on this, but for the majority of the population, it should be completely adequate. Then, as we move up the shoe, we've got a really good lockdown in the midfoot, so no slippage when moving side to side downhill, and we've got a thin tongue that's gusseted. Now, we've got a relatively low heel counter on the back of the shoe. That can be useful in terms of giving you a really snug fit, as it tilts inwards slightly and it's relatively rigid. However, if you're someone who has sensitivity on the back of the heel, like a Haglund's deformity or a history of Achilles issues, you may not enjoy that it tilts inward a little bit. But otherwise, an excellent fit on top. And as we move down the shoe, we have a classic FF Blast Plus cushioning throughout the whole midsole. Now, despite it being a max cushion shoe, it actually feels very different than what you'd expect. Part of that has got to do with the geometry of the shoe, and the other aspect is the stability elements of the shoe. So you can see underneath we've got a relatively broad base of support that increases the amount of contact that you have with the ground, and inherently just making the shoe a little bit more stable. We've got sidewalls on the outside and inside of the heel. They come up, wrap around your ankle, helping to control pronation moments when you initiate contact with the ground, alongside that rigid heel counter. And then we've got lots of sole flare in the forefoot, especially on the outer aspect of the foot. Now that means that it tries to provide resistance and reduce how much your foot may roll outward during the push-off phase of the gait cycle. So that's excellent if you're someone who supinates a lot, as it provides that extra element of support and resistance there. And as we move under the shoe, you can see that it's got quite an aggressive geometry. First of all, it's got an excellent heel bevel, which is this curve up at the back of the shoe. The better the curve, or the better the contour of the curve, means that when you initiate contact with the ground with the heel, it gives you a smooth transition from the back towards the middle of the shoe. Then you've got that broad base to give you extra stability, and then you can see we've got quite an aggressive forefoot rocker, and that is really helpful in assisting with the push-off phase of the gait cycle. It reduces the load that's placed on your calf muscles, especially when you're running on a flatter surface or when you're traversing, and it's got a moderate amount of toe spring, and that's where, as a result of curving upwards, it holds your toe in slight extension. It really facilitates a nice push-off phase of the gait cycle. However, if you're someone who struggles with big toe soreness or conditions like metatarsalgia, you may not enjoy having excess toe spring there. The majority of the population probably won't notice it, as just a really good feature for facilitating that push-off. You've also got a relatively stiff forefoot, which gives extra elements of protection as well, despite there not being any rock plate in this shoe. And under the shoe, we had no problems with grip on some wet surfaces, but to be honest, so far we've mainly been on dry surfaces, as we've had some really good weather over here at the moment. So, relatively aggressive geometry, plenty of stability features, and that affects how it feels underfoot. As a result, you would think that because it's a max cushion shoe, it might be quite soft or quite mushy. That was definitely not the case. I was really surprised when I got going in this. It was quite bouncy, quite responsive, had a little bit of a kick to it because of that aggressive forefoot rocker. So a nice snap to it, despite it having lots of protection underneath your foot, and you don't sink into it near as much as you might think you would. And that was one of the key things that I was apprehensive about, because we've tested the ASICS Trabuco 14, and in that we saw the brand new FF Blast Max cushioning, which is the cushioning that we see in the Nova Blast 5 of the running series, which is a very bouncy, responsive and snappy shoe. So when I saw a max cushion shoe like the Trabuco, still with the FF Blast Plus cushioning, I thought it might be a little bit too mushy underfoot or not that responsive. That was definitely not the case. So what is this shoe in terms of who is it best for? What type of activities does it work well for? Well, Well, if you want to use it as a hiking shoe, well, then it's one of the most comfortable shoes on the market. Probably sitting alongside the New Balance Aero V9, which we'll do a comparison of later on. But it gives you all day comfort if you want to hike for a full day, or if you just have some very rocky terrain that you need extra comfort and protection underneath your foot. This has you covered. Now, when it comes to trail running, well, it's a slightly different story. If you want to do those long daily miles, those easy runs, well, this is going to give you lots of comfort and protection. So it's an excellent option for that. If you want to do some ultra distance running and want some protection as well, this has got you covered. However, even though it has a very aggressive geometry, if you want to do some faster workouts, some shorter racing, this is not the option for you. At 298 grams, it's a little bit too heavy, and the cushioning, while it's bouncier than what I expected, it's not as snappy or as responsive as what you might need, or as what we saw in something like the Speedgoat 7, which is also another Max Stack shoe. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Is it something that you think it's worthwhile picking up? Would you use it for hiking or for running? As always, we've got links to it in the description if you want to check out the latest price on Amazon. And if you're new to the channel or you watch regularly, please subscribe, as it's the one thing that you can do for free that makes the most difference to the channel. Thank you very much for watching.